welcome everybody. It's good to have you with us. We appreciate you making some time to join us today. So what are we covering today? We've got quite a bit to get through. But primarily today is all about templates and understanding how templates can help you deliver a better experience and a more on-brand experience. So we'll go through and look at a few tips to help you through that process. First one is I did some research and some reading of one of my favorite annual publications, which is the Litmus State of Email report that they produce each year. And there's some interesting content in there that I think is probably a timely reminder for us and potentially rolls in quite nicely to templates and branding and staying on brand as much as possible. Also, we promised to show you how we do the user group each month because, as I like to tell people, it really is templated to within an inch of its life. And we'll show you exactly how we do that within Eloqua. So you've got an idea as to one example of how templates can potentially assist, especially with events. Templates and events just seem to go so well together. Then we'll look at what should be created from templates and are there things that shouldn't be? Well, we'll have a look at that as well. And also just revisit for you shared content. It's a reasonably well used part of Eloqua, but potentially for some underutilized. So we just want to refresh you on what shared content is and how that can help. And then lastly, the release information for 20C. So all of us will be utilizing the 20C updates at the moment. So we'll just do a quick recap on those for you as well. And then on the line today, my name is Derek Bell. I'm the Director of Customer Success and Marketing at Marketing Cube, and I'm assisted today by Jason O'Donnell, one of our account directors, and Matt Hemsley, one of our marketing managers. So we're excited to have these guys on the line because they can assist with Q&A and questions. Housekeeping, today's webinar is recorded, as they always are, and those recordings will be made available within a week or so after the event. We're using Zoom to deliver today's session as well. Now, first thing we do is cover off a few questions that may have been submitted by customers. And one of the first questions is from Trudy in Auckland. So hello over there in the other side of the ditch, Trudy, and everyone in New Zealand. Good to have you with us. So Trudy has a reasonably common issue, and it's not an overtly unusual one, and that is that she has a lot, and I've taken this verbatim, so she's emphasized a lot of contacts in the CRM who are not opted in for comms. And is there an example of a well-executed campaign to get CRM contacts to opt in, which was also a good brand campaign, and how it was executed? Doing some digging to try and find something that specifically falls into that very example was extremely challenging, and unfortunately I can't deliver one, but I can certainly give some guiding principles to help with that process. The start of the process should be, first of all, to understand who is in which system, so who's in the CRM, who's in Eloqua, and then who's in both. Now, Eloqua can obviously help you understand that with IDs, etc., from the CRM, and so on and so forth. And then also, don't just group them all as one single audience, because it's highly likely that you may well have people who have not strictly opted in per se, but you have been communicating with. So try and work out, first of all, in that breakup of that group of those people that are not opted in specifically, try and get an understanding of those that you've not spoken to in probably 12 plus months. And the way you probably want to approach that group is a little different to the way you potentially want to approach the group that have been engaging with you, but potentially have not strictly opted in. Now, the quick fix, well, is it a quick fix? Well, the reasonably quick fix in this scenario is to revisit all of your entry points. So those entry points are every form that you present to people to access your content, to register for a webinar or an event, those types of things. All of those forms should contain an opt-in, and you probably need to chat with in-house counsel or with your legal team to understand what that language needs to look like. But Eloqua can absolutely manage that process for you. The source of truth from that point of view becomes Eloqua as the opt-in source of truth. Now, that can all be time and date stamped. If you need absolute integrity from an auditing point of view, that information can then also be transferred over to a custom data object as one example, to keep hold of that information. So you've got the history of it. So you know the date and the time that the person opted in, the email address they used at that particular time to opt in, even the campaign potentially that was associated with that opt-in process. And then you could actually store that every single time that person fills in a form, that information could be transferred to and stored on the custom data object as well. So you then have a far more robust way to track the history of an individual's opt-in. Now, the other scenario, excuse me, of course, is people that are entered into the CRM, and as a matter of course, the integration will then bring them into Eloqua. Now, at that particular point, Eloqua makes some assumptions that as a business, you have the business processes in place that determine that person is able to be emailed. If you don't have those processes in place, that's the first red flag, and that needs to be revisited and potentially quickly. But at the same time, there are ways that you can potentially adjust your integration so that, for instance, if there's been a verbal opt-in, now this will again will depend on your industry. Are you a B2B type player or B2C type player? And what does that mean? Again, your legal team really need to provide you with some advice. But for instance, in most CRMs, there will be an option for opt-in date or opt-out, for instance. And so if the opt-in date is ticked or the date is provided, well, maybe that from an integration point of view will allow that person to flow through into Eloqua. So you've got some options there in relation to the way you do it. The actual campaign, well, I think we're kind of beyond the days of offering free iPods, and someone said that to me the other day, and I said they're showing their age. We don't offer iPods anymore. It's more iPads and potentially a Samsung device. There are different ways you can incentivize people. Probably the low-cost method is to offer them some unique, high-quality content that you feel is relevant. And again, go back to segmentation and look at your audience to understand what you're offering, because you need to create some type of incentive to get those people to opt in so that you've got that recorded. But Trudy, we can talk in more detail to assist you with that one, should you need it. All right. The other question came from Ellie in Newcastle. And sorry, this isn't really opt-in management. I should have changed that. But Ellie, I think you're on the call with us today, and good to have you with us. So Ellie, this one is probably a good idea to contact our support team. And in fact, I think what I can do is actually create that as a service request for you, which I thought I was going to do, but sorry, I haven't done that yet, which I will do. But this will depend a little on if you're using the design editor or if you're using the source editor, so HTML, etc. There are a range of different things we can look at there. So we can also probably look at the size of the images that you're uploading. The general rule that I've always followed and have encouraged customers to follow is to upload the image to Eloqua in the size in which you need it. So for instance, sometimes I've logged into clients' instances and there's a copy of the logo. Sometimes there's 25 copies of the logo sitting there in the image library, and some of them are 4,500 pixels wide, which is pretty insane. So it's generally not an issue from Eloqua's point of view in how it presents it to you. The challenge becomes one of the email client that is receiving that message. So some clients will have an issue taking a 4,000 pixel wide logo and reducing it down to 200 pixels. So it's always best to upload the image in the size that you need it within your particular, whether it's landing pages or emails, but it's emails here that I think you're primarily talking about. So let's have a chat to the Marketing Cube support team and see how they can assist you with that one, Ellie. All right, so first step or first topic we want to look at was the Litmus State of Email report that I mentioned to you earlier. And while reading through the report, one of the quotes that caught my attention was from Chad White. Chad happens to be, well, he's currently with Oracle right now, but Chad has had the fortune of working for ExactTarget / Salesforce. I want to say he's with Adobe, but I can't quite remember that one, so don't hold me to that. But he's now with Oracle and has been with Oracle, I think, for nearly 2 years. But so he's also published author, you can see there, the author of Email Marketing Rules, and is quite well known. You'll see him on the speaking circuit and all sorts of different things in the technology world. But his point here, I think, is really valid in that every channel wishes they were as successful as email. And so people have tried to declare it dead. RSS, mobile, Facebook, even Slack, they all said that email's dead, and here we are sort of 10 years on, 15 years on, and email's still ruling supreme. So my point to show you this, and especially that last paragraph down the bottom there, is that you're potentially sitting on what is one of your company's or your organization's most important assets, and that is your email database. And your email database will enable you to deliver a range of things, certainly from a cross-channel point of view, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But don't underestimate the value of those contacts and those people that are sitting in your database. And it kind of goes back a little bit to Trudy's point that she's identified an issue that she needs to rectify. And I would encourage all of you to think through that process and make sure you're comfortable with that process. Because from a commercial point of view, there is absolute value in ensuring that process is done correctly, that they are opted in, and that you're in a strong position to be able to segment and deliver content that is of value to those different people and those different audiences. So I'll leave you with that as a little bit of thinking music. So one of the points that Litmus go into in quite a bit of detail is a more integrated approach, but with email at the core. So email is that unique identifier that people use to sign up for all sorts of different things, whatever it might be. It's that one piece of information that comes back to help you identify the individual. So the point that Litmus are making here is, we have to think cross-channel. Now, from a cross-channel point of view, I should make sure and point out to you that your Oracle has a wide range of options and products and applications within the Marketing Cloud stack, and actually beyond the Marketing Cloud, right across what they call their CX range of applications that help you build in this strong cross-channel scenario. It's really easy. I mean, all I do is really sit here and play with Eloqua every day, and you can kind of put on some blinkers. But every now and then I need to remind myself that there is this massive world out there of platforms, and depending on the size of your organization, there's a whole swag of offerings depending on your business need and what you're after. But always try and have a think about how the extended Oracle family of products could potentially support you and assist you. SMS is just one example, for instance. So SMS is something that you can add that starts to take you immediately a little cross-channel. Then you can start to think about adding Facebook and LinkedIn. And there are many of you on the call today who are using the Facebook lead ad and LinkedIn lead ad feeders that bring content or bring fresh leads into the Eloqua platform. So if you're doing some of those things, you're already playing a little cross-channel. The key is to, when you do want to play cross-channel, is to bring all of that information together. So Litmus tell us that is a game changer moving forward. So the other thing that that Litmus point out is this ability for email to inform other channels and really drive the overall marketing success. So from a measurement point of view, as Chad points out, measuring campaigns, and we covered this quite a bit in June. You might remember we had Trish from Victoria University share her experience with their attribution program that they'd set up. And like many of our university clients, this month, we have we have open days taking place right across from New Zealand, right across Australia and other parts of the region as well. And the attribution becomes really critical. So once all the dust settles and those major events are finished for the universities, it will be fascinating to be able to sit down and then actually have a strong look at the attribution and understand where that's coming from. So how will that information then help drive decisions for social spend, for advertising on radio, on television, all those sorts of different things? Attribution is a big part of that exercise. So that was a little bit of thought leadership, try and help you think a little bit outside of our Eloqua world from time to time, which I'm as guilty of as much as anybody. All right, so the next thing we want to do is we promise to show you a little bit about how we use templates each month with the user group. And so first thing I want to do is explain to you the different parts of Eloqua that we use. So which assets are templated, and as I've said there, as many as possible. So we have campaign canvases. We have two, and I'll explain why two. Landing pages, we have two. That's because there's a registration page and a confirmation page. Then we also have segments. Now we have multiple segments, and again, they're templated, and I'll show you what those templates look like. Multiple landing pages, segments, as I said, at least 4. Emails, it's around 5 emails, and each of those are templated, and a couple of forms as well. So let's have a look at the rest. So landing pages. I always start with landing pages because this is where I'm primarily focusing on the messaging. So when it's time to think about next month for the user group, first thing I do is go to my templates, grab the landing page registration template, which is all filled with lorem ipsum, and I'll show you these here in just a moment. And I start to look at the key messaging that I want to do. And so I share that with the team. We kind of agree that that's going to work. And then from there, I'll go and build out the emails, et cetera, et cetera. But it really contains all of the key messaging. The confirmation page is really just a recap of the primary registration page. It is tailored and does have some shared content and other bits and pieces on it. I'll show you that. And invitations to the user group are posted on our website. And so you can generally register for the user group before you get the email. If you go to our website and look up to upcoming events, you'll see information there. Why 2 canvases? Okay, so strictly speaking, you don't need to do 2 canvases. I just find it's a little bit easier. Let me explain why. So we have 2 canvases. Canvas number 1 is the one that issues all of the emails and invitations to people and drives them to the registration page. Canvas number 2 is populated only by form submission. So once people register for the user group, we use the form processing steps to push them onto canvas number 2. So if you go back to my thinking and how I explained that we do the landing page first and we get that functioning, then the form, et cetera, and then I put that onto the website. What that means is that that whole process can be functioning and be live. I don't have to wait for the emails to be built. So it's kind of more about a bit of a time management thing in wanting to get the registration page for the user group up as quickly as possible and not be delayed while we tailor and work on the emails per se. So, because remember, you can't activate a campaign canvas until all of the assets are built and complete. So that's why I have the 2, essentially. Now, one thing that we also do with the first canvas is we send out, and many of you will have experienced this, you receive the invitation. If you register on that first email, then it's all good. You get your confirmation email, and then you'll get a reminder later on, etc. However, if you don't register with that first email and you either open or you do not open the first email, then you will get a second email. And so that is sort of like a last chance to register type of scenario. And I wanted to go through and do a little bit of analysis and just to understand how effective that is. So what I've done, generally over the years, we found it to be a very effective process in relation to getting more people to register. Some people just generally forget, right? It disappears down their inbox. It's not like there's any malicious intent for them to not attend or not participate. People just get busy. And that's totally fine. So the purpose of that second email is to encourage people to open and to register. So what I've got here is looking at the first and second invitation, and you can see the first invitation generally performs best. However, you'll see that the unique open rate on the second invitation is almost the same as the first, and the click to open rate on the second invitation is at 20%. So that's clicking behavior, which is good, but of course in this context it's all about who actually registers. And we can see here the unique form submissions following the first and second email broken down, that nearly 30% of the people that register for the user group do that based on the second email invitation that they received. So this is a very tight focus, because it's focusing just on those who participate in the user group campaign, which is obviously, well, globally it's about 500 or 600 people that we issue invitations to. But you can see there's a clear or there's clear support to continue with the idea, making sure you get that second invitation out. Getting your audience right is key, and I can't underestimate this one or understate this one enough. And the use of templates from a segmentation point of view, that's the magic to providing the consistency. If your templates are reasonably simple, as in maybe there's only 1 or 2 filters, that's fine. Maybe it's easy for you to remember to do that every time versus creating a template. However, I know many of you on the call today have fairly complex data structures where it's not just Eloqua that you're looking at, it's certainly CRM information you're looking at. In some cases, there's custom data object information and filters that need to be applied, and the exclusions are just as important as the inclusions. And you'll notice on that third bullet point, I've said the same thing over and over. So that should read, the exclusions are just as important as the inclusions. So then if you factor in the fact that segments can actually be dynamic, there's thought that needs to be put in, and trying to remember all of those various aspects every month or for every campaign is probably just not the best use of your time. And so utilizing templates is the key in that whole process. Okay, so let's jump in and have a closer look at what that might look like. So first thing I wanted to focus on would be segments, because we start with the audience and work from there. So if I go into the template chooser within Marketing Cube's instance, you can see there's quite a few templates there. I can filter by the type of segment template that I'm after. And you can see there's a few here. So we've got Eloqua user group non-members only. So from our point of view, that is people who we know are using Eloqua, but are not currently a member of the user group. We also then break it down to our customers, so Marketing Cube customers, and then also prospects. So we have those who are not necessarily customers of Marketing Cube, but they are customers of Eloqua. And so breaking those audiences down, and then in some cases, we don't mind customers, prospects, whoever, just simply all subscribers. So if I focus on the customer one as an example, you can see the various filters that we then apply to do that. So we use an email group used from a subscription point of view to determine who's involved in that process. Then we use other values, and now this is going to be different for everybody. Everybody's system is a little different. I'll just zoom in there, it might make it a bit easier for you to see. So in our world, we have account types built into our system that help us identify customers versus prospects and business partners and those sorts of things. Always good to have some exclusions as well, just makes the number higher quality. So we exclude anyone that's globally unsubscribed or anybody who may have unsubscribed just from the email group. It's always good to make sure you exclude any hard bounces. Again, you don't want them appearing in the number because you can't email them anyway. We have an inactive field within our system. So if we know somebody's left an organization, we don't globally unsubscribe them because that's not really what has actually happened. They simply left an organization. So we flag that person or that contact as being inactive. And so we capture that as an exclusion. And then we have a whole bunch of different account types within our organization that we would exclude as well. So that becomes a far more helpful process. I literally have to simply name that, save it, and that's my segment done. There's nothing else that I need to do beyond that. And then, of course, if we go to landing pages, so landing pages is the next step. So again, if I just type in user for user group, I can see again, there's quite a few there. So user group confirmation page, user group registration page with form, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the one that we want. So this is where the user group starts each month. And you'll see there's some other templates there. I keep the older ones more so from a demo point of view, but I would encourage you to probably tidy up your template library. Alrighty, so everything is sitting here ready to go. Now, some of the attributes that you'll notice is we always try and use lorem ipsum wherever we need to so that we don't mistakenly include old content, but then we have specific sections that we want to maintain that are always going to be the same. The form here, this particular form is purely just a placeholder, and you'll see I've even called it replace this form. It's just so that when I get in there, the styling is all done. So for instance, if I replace that with this month's form, and there we go, it just then simply drops in and all the styling, etc. is done. So I don't need to change anything. Topics, etc. When the information is happening, the event itself, etc. What we've started to do here is we use dynamic content to deliver this. So the dynamic content, because we ask most of you which country you're in, it enables us to adjust the information. So what we're trying to do is to personalize it as much as possible, so that whether you're in New Zealand or Australia or various parts of Australia, the Philippines, Hong Kong, Japan, and I think I just made some changes to the template or the other day. So we started to include North America, etc. as well. It's just that one little level of personalization to improve the overall experience. And so each month I just simply swap that one out. Then the rest remains as templates, as you can see. So I find it generally a better principle to use placeholders for imagery, because we can tend to be a little bit lazy. And if there's an image hardwired into the template, we're like, yeah, okay, whatever. And we just move on and we don't bother changing it. So having a large, ugly gray box with some dimensions is a much better call to action to find the appropriate image to use there. Okay, so we've done segments, simply going to the segment, saving it, and we're done. This is where I do most of the thinking in relation to what we're going to be talking about, and trying to be really concise in relation to what the event is all about. This here, we try to, where possible, always identify, if we use an image from Unsplash or some of those various websites, we always try to drop in a little bit of code here from that website to give credit to the photographer as well. So that's why, and it comes in HTML, so I've just used the content block there to do that. All right, so that's emails, landing pages. Then we go on to the form. The form is actually obviously the crux of the whole exercise, because you've got to get everybody involved and excited about registering, and you need it to be as seamless as possible. So you can see I have a form set up for replays. We have a form that is just for general webinars, not the user group. And then we have one here or two for the user group. Again, forms can be complex. And so the best thing to do is to template them. I mean, the registration is the same pretty much every month. Doesn't really change a great deal. But you can see down the bottom here, this is all of the hidden fields that sit behind it. And there's no way that I'm going to sit here and remember to add those every single month. And without using a template, it would just be an absolute nightmare. Processing steps, again, all of the processing steps are there, ready to go. All of the shared lists, etc., that we utilize. We have different shared lists. So for instance, we have one called all-time user group registrants. And so this is just simply hardwired into every form. So as long as you've registered at least once, you'll appear in that particular shared list. And we use that in a range of different campaigns for inclusion and exclusion and all sorts of different things. That's the template for the registration form. Then the campaign canvases. So as I said to you, there are two campaign canvases that we use. And the first one that I use is the second one, as I said before. So this is the webinar confirmation page. And so I simply come in here and it's ready to go with everything that I need. So the Zoom piece is there. So the form is configured. It connects right here. We get confirmation emails sent. Then we wait beforehand for reminders, registering email reminders, then coming down to see if people ask for SMS reminders. Some of you would have received your SMS reminders today, and so this is how we go through that process. And then also built into the template is the post webinar labeling for those who attended versus no-shows. And so what we do is we use the external activity to enable that information to be recorded against your individual profiles. And so this is all done, as you can see. I haven't even saved it, but it's all pre-populated. All I need to do is pop in the specific information that relates to this month's webinar. And so I simply slot that information in there. And so then essentially the nice thing is once you save that and you get the little number up here in the top left-hand corner, then essentially it's your to-do list. It's got everything there that you need to go through the process and add things. So that's the second one. And the first one, let me show you the live first one. So this is all of the user groups for 2020. And here we go, invitations only. And here it is. So you can see the multiple segments. So the customer segment is in fact dynamic. So every hour that information refreshes. So once I launched the campaign, Eloqua was checking every hour to see if there are any new registrants that may have popped in. So we have an internal list. So this is, again, this is just simply hardwired into the template. So this is for the team at Marketing Cube. And so each month they receive their invitations as well, just so they're on the ball with what's happening, the topic, etc., those sorts of things. Should they be having any discussions with customers? So they can see that. And then we have an Oracle list, so good friends at Oracle. So those who are employed at Oracle, that is, so oracle.com. Several of the team there have registered to be members of the user group as well. So if there are any of you guys on the call today, it's great to have you with us. And so we give the Oracle team there a nice little personalized experience, helping them understand what's on offer and what the user group is all about. And then the third channel is prospects. So these, again, are folks that we know are using Eloqua, but are not necessarily Marketing Cube customers. And some of you may also be on the call with us today, so welcome. And so you can see the experience that's sort of going on here. Now, because these are all dynamic, you see how they're still highlighted green versus the gray. That means that for the life of the campaign, and in fact until midnight tonight, it's going to keep looking at that information and those filters to bring any new contacts into the campaign. But the date parameters, etc., will exclude people should someone register today, because what I don't want to do is send them an email to invite them to something that happened 2 hours ago. And so the filters here will control that process and exclude them. But they'll be all ready for next month. And so there you have it. There's a range of templates. I didn't show you the emails, did I? Sorry. There are quite a few that we use. And as I said, it's been templated to within an inch of its life. So you can see we have thank you for attending. Sorry we missed you. I was getting to the point with switching from standard time to summertime that I was just getting confused each year, and I was sure that I was going to be sending people the wrong times. So I'm like, forget it. I'm just going to template it. So I know that when we go into daylight time, I'll use the AEDT confirmation email, because there's all the other time zones involved as well, as you saw with that dynamic content. So I just found that easier to do versus trying to remember each year as to what I need to go backwards and forwards an hour. Confirmation email. We refreshed, you might have noticed we refreshed the invitation email this year, just using some icons and sort of adjusting the layout a little bit. And so that's what this one looks like. So once I've built the landing page, there are some things that can just simply be copied and pasted in. So for instance, the topics will just be copied and pasted in. You can see here a placeholder for the dynamic content, duration information. You'll see here again, we've got Australian Daylight Time or Standard Time. So all I do here is, obviously for next month, we're getting close to summertime, aren't we? So next month I'll come in here and just simply delete what's not appropriate. So we're ready to rock and roll. And so that's how that works. So the next question that tends to come up is, what should be created from a template? And as I've said here, not everything necessarily can or should be templated, but not using a template really should be the exception and not the rule. If you're having to open Eloqua each day and start with a blank sheet of paper, an email that has no branding, or a form that has no fields and no processing steps, or a campaign canvas that is completely blank, you're really starting behind the 8 ball. And you've got all of these functions available to help you get a much better experience out of the product and to hopefully speed the build time as you go through the process. So I just wanted to try and get a little bit of an understanding from those of you who are with us today, based on what you're doing today, So not what you'd like to aspire to be doing, but what you are doing today. Which of the following do you generally create from a template? Okay, so far 68% are using emails, followed closely by landing pages and segments, and then forms and campaigns. I find that really intriguing. Forms, I can't remember the last time I created a form from scratch, always creating them from templates. There's just so many moving parts. And look, and if then there aren't so many moving parts in your forms, then maybe that would imply that there's some work to be done. Maybe you're not maximizing what forms can do for you from that point of view. So Laura asks the question, she says, what is the ideal time period between initial invite and reminder? Yeah, that's a great question, Laura. Look, I find it differs a little bit between those old-fashioned things we used to do called in-person events versus webinars. For the longest time, I watched very carefully as other organizations emailed me to invite me to attend different events. And from a webinar point of view, generally I found people would hit you up about a week beforehand, maybe 2 weeks beforehand, and that would kind of be it. Versus the in-person events, again, it depends on your audience. If you're looking to attract a C-suite to an in-person event, you probably need to get your invitations out, certainly at least in the Australian market, and I would imagine the New Zealand market as well, at least 6+ weeks. So 6 weeks before the event, and obviously try a couple of times. So that's getting the invitations out. Then reminders. So reminders, all again, depending on timelines. So for the user group, you'll notice that what we do is we try to get invites out at least 2 weeks beforehand. That doesn't always work, i.e. this month it was a week. But we'll typically do an email reminder 3 or 4 days before the event. So that is to those people who have actually registered for the event. And then in the context of a webinar, we find a 1 hour beforehand, either SMS or email is also really valuable. The SMS reminder is fantastic. It's and even for face-to-face events, when we would do good old-fashioned in-person events, what we would often do is if it was a breakfast, we would send an SMS reminder, a little bit cheeky, maybe around 6:30 p.m. the night before. We just wanted to make sure the person was potentially at home and not just in the busyness of the office, just as a reminder, don't forget, got to get up a bit earlier, come to the breakfast event. Or if it's a lunch event or evening event, maybe a couple of hours beforehand, via SMS is a great tool. And if they haven't opted in for SMS, then obviously just simply an email reminder. So it all depends on your ideal audience, I think, Laura, at the end of the day. But hopefully that gives you a little bit of advice and some suggestions. Okay, cool. Thank you. All right, let's end that poll. We've got most people responding. And let me share those results with you. So look, not surprising, email certainly has come out on top there as the one that you are using templates for the most. Landing pages and segments followed by forms and campaign canvas. And again, I'm a little bit surprised maybe with the campaign canvas, but that's okay. We can talk about that further. Let's jump on to looking at some of those campaigns that would make sense to be templated. And I use that term more generally, not just campaign canvas. So if you had to be in a position to deliver an urgent email communication, would you be running around like a mad person trying to get all of those bits and pieces lined up? Or would you be in a position to be able to go to an email template that has been pre-designed and is ready to go for urgent style communications? Would you be in a position to be able to grab segments by templated segments of particular cohorts or organizations or groups of people that you needed to talk to? So urgent campaigns are a classic example of where using templates can absolutely speed the process to get those communications out the door. So I give that one to you just simply as a suggestion. It's kind of like, well, do we really need to do it? I can't imagine we ever will. But then, of course, the time arrives and people are potentially running around like mad people, frantically getting organized. So have a think about that one. I'll leave that one with you to think through. But let's have a look at a closer understanding of the different types of templates and audiences. So building out templates for segments or audiences, we like to call them, the perfect candidates for templates would certainly be any of those more complex builds that you might have. So if your segment includes multiple sources, custom data objects, the Eloqua contacts, CRM information, those sorts of things, or subscriber-based campaigns like I showed you with the Eloqua user group. Maybe internal teams broken down by business channel or maybe even channel partners. Do you have a segment that is all customers, or for our university clients, is it all students? Is it broken down by past students, current student, alumni, those sorts of things? Do you have these templates available that you can grab very quickly? Think about when you first started using Eloqua, when you joined the organization and were told, okay, this needs to go to these people. Well, how on earth am I going to find those people? Imagine if there'd been a segment template that matched what it is that you needed to do. It would make your life a lot easier. So which campaigns lend themselves to be templated? Well, again, think back to when you first started using Eloqua and you had to, there all of a sudden there's the campaign canvas in front of you. It's completely blank. Probably like the look on your face. What do I do? So there are some campaigns that lend themselves to being templated. Events is certainly one of them, whether it's in person or webinar types of events. If you're launching new products, for instance, and you have a standard process you go through when you do that, and you might want to share content for people to download and access, etc., and you have a timeline that needs to happen over, etc. Those sorts of things are great examples of where templates from a campaign canvas point of view can absolutely help change and speed things along for you. Emails, look, I probably don't need to spend too much time on this one because most of you are, in fact, using templates. I'd encourage you to always try and remove any real copy and replace it with lorem ipsum. If you're accessing templates that actually have real copy in it that was from a fantastic email that was written 2 years ago that we've saved as a template because it works and it's lovely, that's great. But think about the new person starting in the organization. The last thing you want is for them to send out an email using a template with old copy that they forgot or missed, for instance. So, and always avoid URLs in any of your templates. So certainly email and landing pages, obviously. Just make sure that the only URLs you really use are probably to fixed assets like the homepage, preference center, privacy policy, about us, those sorts of things, because the last thing you want to do is include, again, an old URL from a previous campaign. Landing pages, confirmation pages, following form submissions, landing pages where you're presenting content or access to certain information on a regular basis. So is it thought leadership? Is it updating preferences? Event registration, delivering a consistent experience, both a visual and a functional experience, making sure that's consistent for people. Maybe informational pages as well, something where a form is not necessarily required and you're simply presenting information to people. And that could potentially even form part of your website. So from a CSS and styling point of view, remember that the Eloqua landing pages and your emails can be styled to look exactly like your on your brand guidelines from a visual point of view. Now, if you need a hand with any of that sort of stuff or the CSS, we've covered this previously, but if you do need a hand, please reach out to the Marketing Cube support team or to Jason or to Adrian or Marika. Any of those guys can assist you with understanding how that can be done. So Emily says, hello, Emily. Derek, we've tended to use the copy function for campaigns, segments, forms that are repeated on a regular basis. Could you please outline how or why templates would be a better way to manage this to help us justify the overhead of setting these up? Okay, so look, Emily, I'd say from an overhead point of view, it's not a massive overhead. You could probably, and this is the assumption, of course, if you can find probably a few hours, you could potentially take care of it and you'd have them saved as templates. The benefit of creating templates versus save as, or the copy function, forms especially, forms are generally fairly complex beasts, and simply doing a save as of a form can bring its own amount of issues because you'll make changes for the next campaign and then you keep getting error messages because you've removed required rules based on what the form was originally designed for. So if you find yourself getting error messages with forms that you've done a save as or a copy of, the argument is, well, surely it would just be easier to create a purpose-built form as a template that would speed that process. Same with the campaign canvas. With the campaign canvas, every time you copy it, you've then got to go through and remember to adjust every single component because dates change, timeframes change, the assets that you're presenting change, etc. The benefit of using the template as well is that what you'll get is the error message up in the top left-hand corner, the little bubble that tells you what needs to be done before you can launch the campaign. However, if you copy it across, you don't get any of that benefit. You don't get any of those prompts reminding you to actually make sure you add this email, adjust this, this needs to be added, etc., etc. And there's just always a chance that somebody's going to mess up and leave something in there that was actually from last month and not this month. So they'd be the primary issues that I would focus on. It's generally just a lot easier and a lot safer. And I think the time invested to have to go through the campaign to make sure there is nothing left from last month because we've just done a save as, I think the amount of time required to do that is probably more than if you just simply accessed it from a template and it was a nice clean slate and it was ready to go. So that would be my suggestion. Emily says she's sold. All right, okay, great. I'll move on. I'm not a salesman, but that's fine. I'll move on. Thanks, Emily. All right, so mixing content blocks as part of your asset build process. So we've talked a little bit about content blocks previously. I think we spent a whole session on them earlier this year. But content blocks are great for a whole range of different things. The content blocks are available both within your emails and landing pages. And the idea is that you can take a content block, and somebody can manage these too, by the way. Now, at the moment, depending on how you've set up the user permissions within Eloqua, everybody can create a content block and everybody can edit them. I think that needs to be revisited just quietly. I think you need to nominate a couple of people within your organization to manage and own the content blocks. And so what that enables you to do, the key difference, and we talk about this in here in just a second, we're nearly finished though, is content block when you add it to an email or to a landing page, you can manipulate it and change it. Now you can restrict people's ability to do that if you want to, but the key thing is that you can actually manipulate and change it. Versus shared content has a single master, and wherever you use shared content, it's exactly the same and it doesn't change. The different with a content block is that you give people a guide or an outline of something that you want them to be able to utilize that's on brand, and then enable them to make slight changes or tweaks to it. For example, you may allow them to swap out the image, the call to action, the URL behind the call to action, you may let them change, for example, but maybe they can't change the color of the button because the button is on brand, those sorts of things. So there's more control available from that point of view. So if I jump from there then into shared content, because the point here is to try and give you an idea of the difference between the two. So shared content is reusable content or snippets that you can create once and reuse in emails and landing pages, and it allows you to build it once and reuse it everywhere. That's the key point. Build it once and reuse it everywhere, okay? So to try and help you not get confused between the two, like why one over the other. So shared content is one master asset, and any changes are reflected everywhere that asset is used. Versus a content block, the content block does have a single master asset that is there. However, when you access it and you drag that piece of that content block onto your email or your landing pages, you can be in a position to actually make changes and tailor it. But the changes that you make are now unique to the asset in which you're using it. Okay, so two slightly different applications. I wanted to show you some examples, and I might scoot ahead here because we need to wrap up shortly. But there are a couple of reasons to really use shared content, and these are kind of bullet pointed right here. So increase efficiency, writing your content, write it once and reuse it again and again. It certainly ensures consistency from a marketing collateral point of view. So if you have a product or service and you leave it up to the entire team to describe that product or service, chances are you'll end up with multiple descriptions of it, versus if the marketer is able to go to the shared content library and pull down what is a standard description of XYZ product or service, then it's absolutely consistent across your campaigns. So shared content, create it once and reuse it again and again. Trying to give some context here. So content blocks versus shared content. So a content block might be, read our latest blog post, register for this webinar, download this month's thought leadership, or register for an upcoming series. So those things are very time bound. It's very now, it's very current, etc. Versus shared content might be something, for instance, learn about upcoming events. And so the link in that shared content piece takes people to a static page on the website, and it's the website that is constantly updating. Visit our blog versus visit a particular blog post. Access our thought leadership library versus accessing a specific piece of thought leadership. Learn more about our products or services, and that may take them to very general pages on the website, for instance, or to Eloqua landing pages. These are just simply ideas. This is not really set in stone. This is just one way that we're seeing the two different pieces or two different components being utilized. So to show you an example, most of you will have at some point accessed the replay pages for the Eloqua user group. And if you scroll down on the replay, so this section that's highlighted in blue is actually shared content. The section below is also shared content, so the footer area with Marketing Cube connected capability, that's also shared content. The reason we made this shared content, though, with these two calls to action is to subscribe to important updates and to access other user group replays, is that we intend to adjust those every 3 months. And so what that means is we've got all of these assets sitting out there live, sort of 4 years worth of replays. But what we're able to do is to swap out this shared content, which then means that those last 4 years of assets will be up to date and fresh and current with really clear, specific calls to action that are current now as people visit those pages. So it means that we don't have to manually go back and update that section on the last 4 years worth of of replays. We can simply update it once in shared content and everything is updated at the same time. So from an email point of view, this is a confirmation email following our Contact Us page. So that's just the standard email. Then below that is a block of shared content, which has 3 columns and some information. And again, that's been created as shared content because we want to be able to update it once and have all current assets updated at the same time. Then this section, this is I couldn't fit it all on one screen, so I've had to slice it up. So this last piece of content block is at the bottom of the email. And we've decided to do that as a content block because it's fairly consistent. It doesn't really change a great deal. And so you could argue, well, maybe it could be shared content, maybe it could be a content block, whichever. I think it was the first content block we actually created when we got access to content blocks. So it's just an example of how that can be done. So that's one email with standard content, shared content, and then just a content block added on as well. Alrighty, so we've gone a little bit over time, which I apologize for. So I'm going to skip the section on the release information. We covered most of it last month, so you can see that there, and you're kind of using it now, which is exciting. I want to give you just one reminder. Always make sure we're using the right browsers, and the most current browsers that Oracle have tested is Chrome version 80 and Firefox version 75, so that'll always give you the best experience. Well, folks, if there's no questions, thank you so much for making some time to join us today. Please do drop us an email if you do have any questions. Happy to answer those, and we'll leave you to enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining us.